Well, I think it's true that he was defending his own border and the industries. The Japanese had also put a lot of industries into Manchuria, but China didn't have much industry, sort of an imperial fringe, in Shanghai along the coast that the British and others had built factories. And there was a distinct possibility that the U.S. would bomb those factories, that the U.S. Would put an American army on the Yalu River, which I think the Chinese still would resist if Korea were unified. But I developed a lot of evidence, mainly in Chinese and Korean sources, that it was also a matter of reciprocity for what the Koreans had done for them, and that for a new revolutionary regime to let the North Koreans hang out to dry when many of his officers had fought with Kim Il-sung and the other guys in the North Korean military would be most unfortunate. And then the third reason, I mean, it took me forever to get any handle on what Koreans had done in China with that revolution. But it goes all the way back to 1921 or 2, when the defense minister of the North Korean army in 1950 had been at the Whampoa military academy. That's where Chiang Kai-shek went. Many of Mao's allies. It's the most famous military training facility, all the way back to the early 20s. There were Koreans on the Long March, including one of the biggest generals in the North Korean army in 1950.
May I ask you a question? Why?
Because, I mean, it's partly that when Westerners look at East Asia, they think, well, I better learn something about China, I better learn something about Japan, but I don't really need to learn much about Korea. I mean, I'm joking a little bit, but I've seen that many times. It's also the schisms that came into the post-war communist world, where the Chinese felt the Koreans didn't give them enough credit, Koreans felt the Chinese didn't give them enough credit, things like that, so that these stories get distorted.
But why did so many Koreans fight with Mao? In the Long March and in the fighting Chiang Kai-shek and all that?
I think that Japanese colonialism was so oppressive to young men in particular. There's a great book called Song of Arirang. Arirang is a famous Korean song written by Kim San, who was a Korean revolutionary who died in the late 30s. Edgar Snow's wife took his biography. But he said, and he said specifically about Syngman Rhee in 1919, he went to Versailles to try and get the powers to give Korea independence. And this Kim San says, how can Syngman Rhee think that because he can speak English, he's going to go to Versailles and somehow those great powers are going to force Japan to give up Korea? It's just naivete, on unbelievable scale. That says words to that effect. But then he says why he joins the Chinese Revolution is because somebody's finally fighting the Japanese. Because, I mean, the borders between Korea and China almost didn't exist. The Japanese were in all of Northeast Asia by 1905 at one point or another, and then they controlled the northeast provinces of China for 15 years. So it was natural, I think, that you get a generation of revolutionaries who think the only thing the Japanese understand is bullets.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.